The worst effect is the fact that younger people now have a whole bunch of evidence to say, I can't trust the government with regards to how my savings will be taxed. Why would anyone now be putting in anything more than the bare minimum into superannuation? Because even if they think, okay, right now it might be tax preferred, they know that every time the government needs money, they're just going to raid superannuation. G'day, this is Senator Duncan Spender for the Liberal Democrats, and I'm here at the Australian Taxpayers Alliance with Satya, Marar, and we're here talking our favourite negative topic, tax. Satya.
Yeah, so we're the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. We're obviously the guys who fight for you to keep a little more of your own money. It's really quite simple. And being in this particular country we're in, it's unfortunately a constant uphill battle as the governments fight harder and harder to take more money out of our pockets so they can buy some votes. So, Senator Spender, obviously the Liberal Democrats have been big friends of ours, always standing up for reducing government waste and reducing our tax burden. So could you just rattle off a short list of the many taxes that we face in this country?
Well, even just at the Commonwealth level, we've got personal income tax and company income tax and a range of company income taxes as well. We've got fringe benefits tax, we've got Medicare levy, and we've got Medicare levy surcharge. In the world of indirect taxes, we've got taxes on alcohol. We've also got wine equalisation tax to make sure we cover the field. We've got tobacco tax. We've got fuel tax and a whole range of crude excise excises to go on top of that. We've also got payroll taxes, we've got land taxes, we've got a whole range of royalties, there's various fees, and there's a multitude of taxes on motor vehicles. So I think we'd be here all day if we talked about all the terrible taxes. Most of them are very poorly designed as well, and the only way they ever get changed is to be ramped up more and more. So I think we're in bad straits in Australia, and this federal election, we're not having any debate other than from the Liberal Democrats about reducing tax. It's just up, largely from the Labor Party.
Wow, that's crazy. But this is a strange thing, isn't it? We pay all these taxes. We have a welfare state that in many ways seems to be almost as well funded or better funded than some Scandinavian countries. We obviously pay less personal income tax than they do, but my understanding is they pay, they pay less than us in terms of company tax and some other things. And yet our public debt seems to constantly be ballooning. It's almost sitting at a gross figure of 600, a net figure about $300 billion. So why do you think that is? Why do you think we're in the situation where we're paying more and more, but we seem to be constantly living beyond our means?
Well, we're heading where Scandinavia used to be. Scandinavia are recognising some of the errors of their ways, and they're tuning things back a bit. We are expanding our welfare state, which used to be more targeted, so that we get more and more vote buying higher up the income scale. So childcare is now available to families with incomes of up to $350,000. Family tax benefit, you can easily be on six figures and you still get a substantial family tax benefit welfare payment. And of course we still have age pension payments that are available regardless of how valuable your personal house is. So it's not comprehensively means tested either. So we're heading in the direction of where Scandinavia used to be, and our taxes have to rise accordingly. One thing we also have to recognise when we compare ourselves to countries like Scandinavia is that we've also got compulsory superannuation, which really should be factored in as a sort of tax, because despite the promises that were made in the 80s and 90s about what taxation of superannuation would be, government sees that big honeypot of cash and they just ramp up the taxation. So the idea that it's anything other than just compulsory taxation, it's a bit questionable.
And this is a good segue, I suppose, into what's happening now. We know that the opposition leader, Bill Shorten, he's come up with three main tax hikes. There's a whole bunch of others, but I said the three main ones are increasing the capital gains tax by 50%. They're calling it reducing the discount. But that ignores the fact that the discount was brought in because we don't actually index that figure to inflation. So We're going to see people actually losing, not even getting compensated for the value of inflation when they sell that property. We know that he's taking away refunds on cash refunds on franking credits, which are a way to allow older people to live off their own money in retirement rather than going to the pension. He's calling that an end to handouts, whatever the hell he means by that. And he's obviously trying to reform negative gearing, which again is a tax concession that helps people afford to rent.
Well, on each of those, we'd find that, for instance, the capital gains tax. Capital gains have never been taxed at the marginal rate, and that's where Labor is heading. They want to reduce the instances where it's not taxed at the marginal rate and make it that you're taxed in the high 40s, even on capital gains. Capital gains are returns from saving. Saving should not be taxed as heavily as what it is in this country. So I'm concerned about capital gains tax. I'm also concerned about just tax on interest. Every form of saving should be taxed much less than we currently tax labour income. And of course, labour income should be taxed less. Negative gearing is a standard feature of income taxation where basically you get taxed on the difference between your revenue and your expenses that you incur to get that revenue. With the abolition of deductions for various forms of housing investment, you're basically saying, we're not going to give you the deductions for the expenses, we're taxing you on all your revenue. That's just going to distort how we make money in this country and make us all poorer. It's going to knock out a whole bunch of options where you invest in something that has high revenue and high cost, because you're not going to be able to deduct those costs anymore. So it's really government fiddling with how we make money in this country, and it's going to make us all poorer. So it's not a good step by Labor. Unfortunately, with the coalition having increased taxes themselves, there is no major party out there that's fighting for a smaller government and a smaller tax take. We saw with the coalition, they spent the last 3 years raising taxes, whether it's tax on low-value imports or bank tax. They also increased passenger movement charge, which is just a way to make our tourism industry struggle. We've got Tweedledum and Tweedledee with the major parties at the moment, and it's heading in a bad direction.
Absolutely. You touched on, obviously, housing affordability is still a concern. A lot of young people now, in Sydney and Melbourne at least, are very pessimistic about owning a home. Now, negative gearing might not be the right answer to that. You touched on the idea of cutting stamp duty as a way to make it more affordable. What other measures do you think the Liberal Democrats would push to make the dream of owning a home more affordable?
Well, we definitely abolish stamp duties. We, in each of our states, we push the argument that stamp duties are a terrible tax, the worst in the business. They discourage people from buying homes and selling homes. Land taxes are also a problem. They do affect investment properties. They discourage the investment in housing, and there's no reason why we should be discouraging housing. Some of the issues in housing go beyond taxation. We have state governments that intentionally restrict the supply of land for housing so that they can maximise profits out of their land corporations. The state owns land. That doesn't mean it should be trying to maximise profits by denying it to others. It should be releasing Crown land, making it private land, so that people can own their own housing. This idea that land corporations should just be holding money and restricting Australians on the outskirts of our cities from owning houses is really against the concept of what government's all about. They're supposed to be serving the people rather than serving themselves. At the federal level, the main thing is we believe that people should have a whole lot more money in their pockets. So if you slash income tax, then people will be more able to save and build towards a deposit for their first home. I personally, right now, I'm in the renting hell. Obviously, I've got a new gig as a senator, so the pay's better, and I appreciate the taxpayer for providing that. But I totally understand the annoyance of having to deal with landlords and regular inspections, and so many Australians, including a fair number of middle-income Australians, are in renting hell right now. They'd love to own their own house. They'd love to be able to do stuff with their own walls and dig up their own backyard, but they're being denied that basic concept of living in a wealthy liberal democracy because of all this government fiddling. It's pretty ridiculous.